Okay, so finally we got audio back again. Sorry about this. The live stream stuff is just something I'm still working on as well, and I'm also just trying to get the right program to do it. I think OBS is pretty good, but then again, I'm not the best at working it yet, so it's probably not up to scratch yet. So everybody who's tuned in again, thank you for coming back. We just had some technical issues with the OBS program. So the studio that you can see in front of you, that's currently set up the way it is. I've got my compressor here, which is a 500 series, which I talked about earlier. I've got this, which is a summing box. That's actually a 8-channel or 4-channel stereo, 8-channel mono summing mixer. That's something I use sometimes, not all the time. I've also got the Zen Tour, which I'll do a studio tour on this, like a proper thing, so you can see it in, good quality. So that's the Zen Tour audio interface, which is made by Antelope. And then I've got my UAD Apollo, which is the first version, the silver-faced version, the Apollo Twin. I've got the Softtube Console 1, which I use sometimes, not all the time. It's somewhat a good workflow, but sometimes I feel like it just gets in the way of what I want to do. So that's that. Obviously the machine here, that's Machine Mark II. That's for production side of things, and you can see the studio monitors in the background there. And if I did show you earlier, if you were here on the earlier live stream before I cut out, you could see behind this there's a subwoofer and also the amplification for the NS10, well, CLA 10s, which you can see in the background there. Yeah, let's talk on this one, I guess, and we'll get into mixing on the next video, or whatever you guys want to see. We'll get into that and try and address some of the things that you may have questions about. Is there any mixing or mastering things that you have questions about, or plugins that you might have questions about, or techniques that you're struggling with to do with mixing or mastering, or even production side of things? Is there any questions you have about that? Also label questions. I deal with a label directly through a lot of the stuff that I get that through a label that I work with here in Australia. So if you have any questions about how labels kind of work, maybe I can get those answered for you as well. If you have questions about, I guess, releasing your music, it's kind of, I'm not pro with that because I usually leave it up to the label to do the releases and stuff, but I do know platforms like DistroKid and others that work. Am I always using the summing mixer to master? No, not always. I usually try to use what is required. Sometimes I feel like if you're using a summing mixer, sometimes you'll just put it on there and it'll sound not as good as you want it to be, so I just don't use it. It really depends on what the mix or the master requires. So in essence, if I'll just actually get my cam back up here. So pretty much in essence, if it requires it, I'll use it. If it doesn't, I just tend not to do that, because I've been sent masters, well, tracks to be mastered in the past, and there's not a whole lot that's been needed on that track. So I really just get in there, just check and see if everything is where it needs to be as far as levels and what it sounds like. And if it is all good, then that's that track done. Mastering is really, in my opinion, it's really trying to get the track to sound in competition with what's out there now. You're not supposed to, go too loud. Obviously, to get a loud track, you having to deal with other platforms such as YouTube or, iTunes or the rest of it. They have their certain loudness levels that you're having to abide by, in a sense. So if you're getting a track way louder than it needs to be, if you're compressing it too much or whatever, you're dealing with them turning down the volume, plus the fact that I don't feel like the dynamics in a track when they're really ultra loud are there. So you need to have some form of dynamics to make a track sound good and breathe. And I feel like it brings a lot more emotion when the track's actually dynamically correct. So to get to the question, I guess, to answer that, really, if it needs it, I'll use it. If it doesn't, then no. It's just leave it alone kind of thing. That's kind of the key of mastering as well. You got to know when to stop and when enough is enough, so that you don't overdo stuff and overcook it. I've had many mastering projects where I've put way too much on the master bus, and I'm like, no, doesn't sound good. Take it off, and I take off about half of it, and I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I need. And then they send that to the client, and they're really happy. You're like, okay, that's all I needed. So it just, yeah, just try and gauge and take breaks if you're mixing or you're mastering your stuff. Take lots of breaks, come back to it, re-listen to it, listen to it in another location, put it in your car, on your phone. I find that my phone really helps. Listening to this, chuck it on there, and you just have a listen to that. If it sounds good on your phone, it usually pretty much is pretty reliable to sound good in other locations, because your phone is pretty much the worst, I guess, one of the worst scenarios that music can be played on these little speakers on these phones. If you can hear on that really well and everything sounds where it should, then you're pretty safe. If you got any other questions, yeah, it's good to see you there, Vache. Yeah, I am definitely back. I just wanted to finish this, finish this off and do another probably 10 or so minutes on this live stream, and then we'll get back into another one later on. Really just getting used to the whole live stream thing, because it's not something I did a whole lot on my channel. So I know there was a lot of people that were asking for it, or a couple of people at least said if you did live streams, you'd probably get a lot more content or viewers viewing your content, just due to the fact that you can answer the questions directly. So that's what I'm trying to do for you guys now. And yeah, it didn't work. Well, anyway, so if there's any other questions that you have, make sure you hit me up on the channel. I will post things on the comment section as well in my channel, so I'll put posts up giving you guys updates. Let me know, do you think I should create some form of an account that gives you guys access to ask me questions, like, say for example, like I don't know, whatever, like some sort of a Facebook thing or a community account. I don't really like those kind of things, but it's something that I feel like it needs to be looked at, so people can actually contact me outside of here. You've always got email, you can see it in my comments description there. So do I find it hard to get the bass to sound big on small speakers like your phone? What trick to make the bass sound big on them? Okay, so a trick to make bass or your kick sound big, I would say distortion is probably one of the tricks that I use. You have to use it tastefully, not crazy, but there is plugins out there that really help you get your lower frequencies to sit higher up in the mix. You can use waves, like there's the bass plugin that Waves make, which helps you get kind of more of your harmonic range further up in the mix. But that's kind of what I tend to go to, is distortion, because it really does, and use it in parallel as well. You don't have to use it directly on the actual track if you don't want, if it's too much. You can use distortion in parallel. For example, Soundtoys, I should say, they make a plugin. Where is it? Decapitator. So this one's really great. More expensive as far as plugins distortion wise, but it's quite a good plugin to get your bass or your kick to sit further up in the mix, and it allows it to work pretty well, because you're adding these different types of distortion, and you've got your parallel, so you can mix it wet or dry, and obviously make up. And they've got tone control and low end and high end frequency filters there, and you can punish the crap out of it as well. That's a pretty good plugin. As far as other plugins to do that, what other plugins? Camel Crusher, which is not, I don't know if it's sold anymore or not, but Camel Crusher is a pretty good plugin to get things to sit right. Ozone make their own distortion plugins as well, which I'll see if I can show you that. So we've got their vintage stuff, which they've got a vintage tape. That is one way of doing it. You've got their Exciter, which is another version. So that's a multi-band Exciter. So that's got 4 bands of different types of distortion you can add to your mix there. So that's kind of a way that I would use distortion to get my kicks or my bass to sit further up. Generally, what I would tend to do though, if you've got issues with dealing with that, try and figure out if there's anything else that's masking those frequencies as well. Specifically, if you're dealing with a bass that's kind of like a acoustic bass, it has frequencies kind of traveling all the way up to about, I'd say, 6K or so. Those frequencies may or may not be what you need in the mix. It really depends, but it depends on what bass you're using as well, or what kick that you're using, and also worry about the click on the kick as well, because the click on the kick. So when I'm talking about the click, I'm talking about the high end frequency of a kick. So most kicks generally, even if you're using electronic kicks, you can get kicks that have either a hi-hat or something added to it, like something that makes the high-end frequency. They don't necessarily have it loud, but makes the high-end frequency stick out on that kick, so you can hear the transient of the kick, and that's what makes it more perceivable on these type of devices where you can't necessarily hear the low-end frequency. So it's kind of what I do there. There's a lot of different techniques you can use, but that's just a few of them to list off what I do. And yeah, still have the same audio interface. I currently have the Zen Tour, which, yeah, if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it from where the camera shows, but that's the one that's just here. I might just move this up a bit. So that's the audio interface just there, which is a pretty decent interface for the form factor. So the interface has got up to 32 channels, I believe, or something to that effect. It's A to D conversion is best I've heard for the price bracket, as far as, I guess, comparing it to UAD or the rest of it. But yeah, that's currently the one I use, because I can actually I've got 4 inputs at the back there, so 4 pre's that I can get line input into, and that comes straight from the compressor into the interface, and you would know how the rest of it works. You're pretty good there, Vach. Vache, yeah, so that's the one I'm currently using, so it's a pretty good deal. Hasn't done anything wrong yet, so it's worked out pretty well. Other than that, any other questions that you guys have while you're here? I've got 6 people on here now, so we're doing pretty good. I don't really have a whole lot other than the speakers at the back there, and all the stuff that you see on the desk. I don't have any other analog gear. I tend to try and keep everything, well, for the most part, in the box, generally, just because of the fact that it's easier for recall. Analog gear is fantastic, but yeah, it gets frustrating when you have to go back and take photos of it and do all the recall sheets and whatnot when you work with that. What's the Bon on the left? The box, you mean? The box, yeah, the box. That is this little thing here. I believe you're talking about. It's the little 1.8. That's a summing mixer. That little box is a 4-channel, or it's 8-channel, but it's 4-channel stereo and 8-channel mono. It's an interesting box. It's passive. It does pretty well at giving you flavor to your mix, or making your mix sound of, I guess, the analog sound that you get. You know how if you've used analog gear, you can kind of hear the differences in the phase and stuff like that when you work on analog. So I know that you know that, Vache, because you've got a few pieces of analog kit yourself. But yeah, that summing mixer is pretty tasty. I use it to some, maybe drums, vocals, and the rest of my mix to 3 different channels, buses, and then that goes into that, back into my interface, and then back into the A to D conversion. And yeah, that's pretty much how that works. I had it before. I don't know. I think I did a review on my channel for that particular summing mixer. So if you want to hear the audio quality, I might link that in the description below this video. But yeah, it's been there for probably 6 months or so, and it's something that I don't know. I tend to take it in or out of the mix. I don't use it all the time. It's sometimes frustrating to some stuff to a bus, only 3 buses, and then have to work from there. But sometimes it works really well. Like it adds flavor. So oh wow! So we've got 8 people at the moment watching the video. That's pretty crazy. So Are there any questions that you guys have as well, about, I guess, the production side of things? Do you have any other questions about, how I work with the label or how I got in touch with the label? What type of music do you find mostly? Yeah, it's hard to say. Mostly, I'm mixing hip hop and that sort of style of music, but I tend to get sent lots of stuff. Like right now as well, I've got a full album that will be coming up shortly. I should say right now, shortly. There's kind of two different things, but I have an album coming up very soon, which I've got one of the tracks for, which I'm mixing. It's a rock kind of style track, and the album itself is all rock. So getting used to that whole rock genre while listening to hip hop, it's not the same style of music. Hi, good to see you get there, SL Studio. Very good there. I'll get to that as well. But yeah, mixing rock, it's very different to. I mean, you're still doing the same thing. You're listening to the music, you appreciate the music, and you try and analyze what reference tracks are similar to that track so that you can mix towards that kind of sound. And the same process applies to every mix generally. The way you gain stage, it's still the same kind of process. Your gain staging is always there. You need that. And then the way you compress things or the way you EQ things might be a little bit different, depending what track you're working on. But yeah, that's the main stuff. So hip hop at the moment, and rock. So I'm kind of used to the rock thing now. It's taken a bit to get used to it, but yeah, it's something, a learning curve. So what do we got? Is it necessary to have an external mic pre if you have digital mixer like Studio Live? No, you don't have to have an external mic pre, other than if you have one on the digital mixer, if it has a pre. If you're using, for example, an interface to go into that mixer, then yes, I guess you could use a pre. You can use a pre. You don't have to. You can use it. It's up to you. I mean, you always have to have a pre to get into the digital realm. A pre is always required. So if you're recording a mic like this particular one, this has its own preamp inside of this microphone. I'm using it as a USB connection right now, but it has a pre inside the mic. If it doesn't have that, then you'd need some sort of a preamp to get into the digital realm. So yeah, pretty much, it's necessary, but it's, I guess, depends on what pre or what flavor you're going for, depending on what pre you choose to do that. Do a lot of recording independent artists. How do you get connection with the label? Okay, so originally the connection with the label, I reached out to them via internet, via email, and my first connection with the label was to ask them if they needed any producers on that label. I pretty much then was asked, we kind of do, but we also need people to mix the tracks that we've got artists sending as well. So that's how I kind of got into the connection with the label. It really is just making contact with somebody. If you find a label that you are interested in, or if you wanted to be involved with the label, you may not necessarily want to. I mean, it depends. If you're having trouble finding work and you want somebody to do that kind of publishing stuff for you as well, labels are good for that. If you're happy to do everything yourself, be a one-man band, then there's nothing stopping you nowadays of doing that. It's very possible to get your music produced, release it yourself, and get DistroKid or somebody else like that to get your stuff out there on the digital realm. So what do we got here? Vacha's got a mixer, but he still uses the PreSonus Studio One channel tube pre for his vocal takes. Yeah, so see, that's very possible to do that. That's kind of what I would do. If I was trying to be minimalistic, I wouldn't go out there and buy a whole bunch of different pre's just to, save face of what pre's you can use on it. But I would tend to use one or two pre's, stick with it, get used to that flavor. If it doesn't work for you, buy another one that works. There was a guy who actually, when I was working when I was in Sydney, I was working at Taramara Music, if any of you guys know that company. Oh yeah, yeah. I will get to the label stuff in a sec. Yeah, so the company I was working for, Taramara Music, just before I moved to Queensland, there was a couple of people that owned one particular guy. I won't mention names because I don't want to divulge information, but was a guy who owned a studio near the shop, and he actually owned a large format SSL console, and I think he had about 8 or so different pre's. He had APIs that he bought. He had warm audio pre's that he had bought, different brands. But I feel like, I mean, you definitely get flavor out of each pre, and the pre does its job in providing you a flavor. But I feel like the mic that he was recording with as well was the most important part, in my opinion. I think the quality of the mic, or the mic choice, will determine how well you get into the digital realm, and that really does play. When I saw different mics being used, and it definitely does help getting the right take. So if you have a good mic, yeah, you're gonna really, you have to choose the mic for the type of vocal. But then again, there's mics that, like the Slate mic, Slate Digital make their emulation mics that do multiple mics as well. You also get the Townsend, which it's very good. It does quite a good job of emulating expensive mics as well. So I found that for example, the Townsend L22, I think it is, that was a really cool mic. About $2,000, but I think it was worth every cent. So getting into the okay, so I have enough work. Just curious about labels. Yeah, I knew you always got loads of work there, but yeah, plenty of stuff to work on. I find like I have enough work as well. For the most part, I just get, sometimes you get a lot of work that people that expect their mixes to turn out like such when they're not providing the good recordings that you need to have to get the mix. And I've learned a lot of stuff through that, because you really have to work your butt off to get a bad mix to sound good. So it teaches you a lot. You really pull every trick out of the bag when you've got bad mixes or bad tracks to work with. So some plugins are simulating preamps like API. Yeah, they are. And they're pretty good at it too. UAD have a lot of good plugins that can do that. I guess there's nothing like the real thing as far as EQs, even compressors, all of that. But as far as the plugin, if that's all you've got and that's the budget you've got, you definitely can get a good mix or a good preamp kind of sound out of those plugins. So yeah, for sure, that's most definitely very possible out of those. So any other questions that you guys have on this, as far as what else you want to see on this channel, or any other things to do with whatever mixing stuff that you've got, or any other stuff there, let me know in the comments and I'll address that now. Otherwise I might finish this live stream up very shortly. What I will try to do though is, if I can get a consistent kind of date for live streams, so if I can kind of do that on a consistent basis. Sorry, just checking the messages here if anyone else had any stuff there. If I can do a consistent live stream for you guys, if that's beneficial. If it's not, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep doing more Studio One stuff as well. My plan for the future for this channel, at least anyway in the short term, is to get a lot more Studio One, I guess, related information out there, because I know people are looking for that. Also a mixture of machine, because this is kind of something that I find a lot of people produce and don't have a lot of good answers for on the machine tutorial side of things. So I might mix that with the Studio One stuff as well. Also just mixing in general, so show and tells of final mixes once I've got them fully done. I'll show you how I did it. Once that's released, or the track is released, I'll show you exactly what was done there to get to that stage as well. So Vache is saying, in my opinion, analog gear, due to discrete components, will always sound different and pure. Yeah, it definitely does. And it's kind of like, the thing is, to the person who is listening to the track, this is why I find the analog versus digital doesn't really matter in the long run. Is when you finally hear a track on the radio or whatever, you see a lot of people that are mixing the tracks, they use plugins to get to that state. And you know this as well, Vache, you've got lots of work in your studio as well. But A lot of people use plugins as well as analog gear. Some people entirely just use plugins, and their tracks are up being played right now. And I guarantee you, for the most part, the general listener has no clue whether or not a plugin or an analog piece of kit was used on that to get to where it is. So, in that sense, when you think of it like that, none of this matters. It just matters that the track sounds good. What piece of kit you use to get to that doesn't matter. But I always feel like analog, in my opinion, gives you the real essence of the sound that a record sounds like. And it's because a lot of the stuff we're referencing to has been either produced in large format console studios or at least run through some piece of analog, kit to get to where it is now. So it's very debatable whether or not you have to have plugins or you have to have analog kit. That's just something I don't really care about debating with people, because I do what I do and it gets to where it gets to, and people are happy with the mastering that I do as well. So if they're happy with it, if they're happy with the end result and that you're getting paid to do the work, then there's your answer. If you can get away with doing that with plugins, do it. Don't think that because this guy over here or N828 at Crossbeats Music has analog kit that you have to have it. You don't have to have it. It's just something that really does work for my workflow. So yeah, as Vache knows, yeah, he definitely agrees. But it's about the workflow, not the end user. Yeah, definitely. I think the workflow for me is, my workflow is mostly in the box, and it's because, like I was saying earlier, I like to have the recall. I don't like to have to go back and take photos or write down the settings of the compressor. And that's mainly why I got that compressor, because you don't have to do that. And it gives you the best of the both. You get analog plus you get the recall. As soon as you open up the project, you've got this plugin. I'll just go to it now. Where are we? So you've got this plugin here, which will come up. That's the plugin that connects to that piece of kit there. And it does so via USB, which you can see that cable that goes across the front of this compressor here, which is kind of getting pulled on. That connects to the front of the compressor there, which transmits the recall data to this compressor. Inside of the compressor, it's got a digital kind of connection to it, so that allows the analog section of it to be recalled to the settings. Some consoles actually have that kind of thing, like SSL have that in their consoles as well. I think API might have in some of their consoles, but not 100% on that. I am still obsessed with having a large format console. I don't know why. It's just some kind of a gear addiction that I've got. And eventually I probably will have it if I keep going the way I am. It's just something that the tactile feel of the console, and because I've done the live sound before, the tactile feel of that console, it really does... It makes you feel hands-on. You literally don't need to look at a screen to get your mix completed. You can just work hands-on, hearing what you're hearing and working with the console. And there's just a certain sound about different consoles as well. I've been looking at different ones. That SSL6, which recently came out, I actually tested that while I was working at Taramara, and that was... By the sounds of SSL, it sounded very similar to an SSL kind of console anyway, but just summing through it gave you a certain flavor, and I really liked it. For the price tag, to something, I think it is 2,300 or whatever it is, it's probably may not be worth it for you, but if you got the cash to spend, I don't know, some of these kids on YouTube, they have it, surprised that they do, but they don't seem to know how to use it. But anyway, they have it, and it definitely gives you a flavor. So what's this? A lot more of these type of technologies will emerge. Yeah, they definitely will. I think we're only at the start of this kind of thing. I really don't know, to be honest. Well, like working at this digital state, I don't know where it's going to go, but I think these type of technologies, because they've become cheaper to make as well, and like companies like Wes Audio, Bettermaker is another one that makes that type of compressor, like it's a digital recall compressor. When I used it, I didn't like the Bettermaker as much as the Wes Audio, but it's definitely out there. I'm waiting for API to do that with their 2500. That would be... I borrowed one of the API 2500s and I did a video for it, and Yeah, it sounded really good. I was just really happy to hear the way it affected the audio. But then the recall thing killed it for me because I was like, $4,000 AUD, $4,000 for that compressor, or four and a half, I think it was. Um, and I was just like, I don't want to spend half my time project sending a project to somebody, coming back, have to recall the project and do that from there. But it really does help though sometimes to finalize your mix if you don't have the opportunity to recall. Uh, and you really, I think the essence of finalizing something helps in that regard because digital you can go in there, edit, keep editing until you never bring it out, and if you do that you'll probably never actually get the music out there. So sometimes commit, send it, be done with it, that kind of thing. So what's tactile feel is better when you're using automation? Yeah, most definitely it is. That's kind of why the console one, I got that because I like the tactile feel. You can use that for automation as well. Um, but yeah, it's something that I guess if you can afford it, that's where it kind of really plays down to as well. So I moved from my PreSonus Studio One 1824 rack to Studio Live 24. Oh, very good, sir. That is awesome. That is a really cool um, desk there. I like that one, especially with the motorized faders. Yeah, I probably would like to do that. I'm stuck between the digital and the analog realm as far as whether or not I want to get one of those type of mixing desks or if I want to get an actual analog mixing desk that I can't do the motorized faders with. I don't know. It's kind of the whole commit thing. I like to just commit to it, and yeah, that's that's the way I mix. I got over having to go back and redo stuff or hearing something and thinking, oh, I don't really like it because at the end of the day, if you put it out there, somebody likes it or lots of people like it, then that's really what came back to me as what mattered. Um, yeah, so Vache always commits. Has never had to return it back. But for your line of mixing, it can be overkill. Yeah, it definitely can. Um, I guess it depends. If you're using it a lot. If you're not, then what I do is I get a lot of mixes from online, or I get mixes sent to me via Dropbox or whatnot. So yeah, it really depends on what you're doing. So if there is definitely any other questions, let me know before we close down the live stream. Otherwise, I will definitely try to do this. I'm going to put something on my channel for the next couple of maybe every fortnight or every weekend, maybe if I can do a live stream with you guys. That would be super awesome. Okay, so what would you recommend for SSL6? Sorry, would you recommend SSL6 and would you buy another mic pre or use the one on the 6? Okay, I use the SSL6. Yes, I would recommend it. Have you got the money for it, or is it just a plush toy that you want to put though? The reason why I asked that is because the SSL6, it definitely has a flavor to it, similar to the SSL console. They reckon that the mic pre's are their high quality mic pre's out of their larger format console. And yes, on to that, I don't know if they are because when I tested it, it sounded quite nice. The mic pre's were clean. The EQ's kind of, it's okay. The EQ sounds like an SSL EQ, but because it's only a low filter and a high frequency filter, you can either boost or attenuate with either or. You can't use it like a Pultec kind of thing because it doesn't have an attenuation with the high frequency boost. But the boost and the cut, they both sound good. Sounds like an SSL. I think the high frequency is at 3.5 hertz from memory. The low frequency is at 60. It does a shelf and a bell on both of those. And yeah, they're pretty much, they're okay, not bad. Mic pre on it, yeah, you could use it definitely. You don't need to buy an external mic pre to go with it. You could definitely use the one that comes with it. More than likely, you get a good track out of it. And just got a compressor on the way in as well if you wanted to. And you've got the bus compressor on the way on the main mix there. So as far as cost, I don't know if they're going to bring out something larger. I think their plan was bring this little thing out that kind of touches the lower end spectrum of the market. And then I think their plan, well, I'm only guessing, but their plan by the looks of it is to bring out something slightly larger. I'm hoping they do anyway, if it's slightly larger, and give you extra few little bits on that, but it'll probably be more expensive as well. So SSL6 is pretty cool. I liked it. I summed through some of the audio, compared it, and I think I've got some Dropbox files of some of that stuff, but I'd have to check and see if it's okay to get that cleared by the artist to confirm if I could use that on the channel to show you guys. Fader port, yeah, okay, so the single one should work. Yeah, it probably would. Fader ports, I don't know, I've kind of just let that way out on this side yet. I don't really know if I need it. I'm so used to the mouse, so I probably would like it though. So yeah, thank you Vacha for tuning in as well. I really appreciate it, and I thank you guys, everyone else, SSL Studio. I think SL Studio, you tuned in earlier, and also Rocco, you're always supporting here. So really appreciate it, and everybody else who tuned in or hasn't made any comments yet. Really thank you for that. Thank you for your support on this channel as well. And hopefully this was somewhat informative for you. I'll try and do more and more of these in the future, and once I get over this cold that you currently hear that I've got, I can probably step up the video content as well. I just want to give you guys an update as to where things are at and continue with this channel as per usual. So Studio One, I think they've released some stuff out as well, so I'm going to hit that up and get some content out there for that as well. So hopefully I see you guys all on the next one, and if otherwise no other questions, I will catch you next time. Cheers and peace out for all y'all. See you guys next time.